Hello, this is Hunter McDermott with another Anyone Can Play Guitar video. In this video we're going to talk about the CAGED system. So to me the CAGED system is useful as a way to help you organize and understand the entire guitar neck. And then also it helps you vastly expand your chord vocabulary using shapes that you're probably already familiar with. So here's the basic concept. You've got, as the name suggests, you got 5 chords: C, A, G, E, and D. And most of you probably know these shapes. These are just open chord shapes. There's C, A, some people do it like this, G, E, and D. So the idea is that you can take these shapes and move them around and connect them one to the next to learn to play the same chord in a different position. So we'll tackle that in 2 parts. So in the first part, let's just look at how to take these shapes and take them from being an open position chord, by which I mean they include open strings that you're not fretting with your fingers. So on the C chord, for example, you've got the 3rd string G is open and the 1st string E is open. And so what happens is if we take the 3 fingers that we are pushing down and we slide them up, then we still have those 2 open notes ringing. So not everything has moved up, just some of it. Now this can sometimes produce pretty results, like if you go one more time, that's a really pretty chord. That maybe not so much. That could be okay. Anyway, so the idea is that we want to start by seeing how to take these open position chord shapes and make them closed position, as I put it, so that you have no open strings involved. Alright, so here's what the C chord looks like. Let's see, do I have X's? No. So, and these are open strings up here. So we're playing this shape. And what we want to do is we want to move every single note up. So this would go here. This would go here. This open note would go up to the 1st fret. This one would go to the 2nd fret. And that would also move up from the open to the 1st fret. So now what happens is we have to change our fingering, because we have to make use of our pinky somehow, because we can't bring those 2 notes up otherwise. So we'll replace our 3rd finger from the C chord with our pinky. So we put pinky right here. 3rd finger here. Index up here. And now what we have to do, because we don't have 5 fingers to use on the fretboard, is use a bar across the 1st fret. So I'll go ahead and fill in this, telling us that our 1st finger needs to bar across all 3 of these strings, and then we'll use our 2nd finger right here. Now that will be probably tougher on your hands than this is. Right, we're using more fingers, and anytime you're barring, and especially when you're barring at the 1st fret, the tension on those strings is such that it'll be a little bit tougher. So that might take some time to practice and get used to the amount of hand strength required to make that happen. Alright, but so a really nice thing has happened. So if we know from our music theory videos that when we take a note and we slide it up, we are moving that note up by a half step. So the root of a C chord is C, which is right here. And if we move that note up, we get C sharp. So the root note of this shape, the closed position shape that we just did, is C sharp, which means that we are now playing a C sharp major chord. And then now, because we have got a closed position shape, we can slide it up more. So if we go up from C sharp a half step again, we have D. And D sharp, or E flat. E, F, F sharp, G, so on and so forth. So by taking the time to work on this one shape, you're taking what is commonly used in only one spot as C major, and you're basically multiplying it by 12, because now you can play it, you can use that major chord shape to play any major chord with any root. So that's giving you a hint of the power of this thing. I will say before I move on that I understand that the bar is quite tough, and we will see this more as we go along, that there are some other shapes that really just, even though theoretically you can do them, they're not practical because of how difficult they are to stretch or require too much strength. So what I will do a lot of the time if I'm going to use this shape is I will take out these two notes. I just won't play that string. So going back to C sharp, I would use my 4 fingers on the fretboard, and then I would just mute that first string. And then you get the same thing. All the notes that you need for the chord are accounted for, but you're making it a little bit easier on yourself because you don't have to bar. And then in fact, you can use this as a good place to start, because this is a little bit more of a stretch than the regular C chord is. And then as you build strength, work on dropping that finger down and getting the bar there. All right, but so going back to, so let's just take through all 5 of the chords first, and then we'll look at how they connect. So our A chord, so C, A, G, E, D, the CAGED system. So it would look like this. So we've got our open A string and our open E string, 5th and 1st. All right, so we do the same thing here. We move everything up. So these would move up a fret. The open string would move up to be a closed position, and then there as well. All right, so now it depends on how you play this. People play this using different fingerings. So some people would play this with a bar on their 3rd finger, kind of mashing their finger across those 3. Some people love that. I've never been comfortable with that. I find that very strenuous on my hand. So I use all 4 fingers, so 3 right across there, and then the index here. And now if I want to get this string on this note on the 1st string, then I bar across that with my 1st finger. So that way the base of my index finger is grabbing this note right here. Alright, so think for a second what that chord would be. We had an A major chord, the root of which is A, and we've raised every single note in the chord up by a half a step, including the root. So if the root goes up a half step, from A we get B flat, or you could call it A sharp. If we go up again, we get B. So B is a chord that comes up sometimes because people learn songs in the key of E major, and then they need a B chord and they go, I don't know, right? And the simple solution for that is you take an A chord and you slide it up a whole step, and you get B. And you go up again, you get C, C sharp, D, so on and so forth. So it's the same exact thing. You take one chord shape that usually works in one spot as A, and you multiply it by 12. All right, let's knock out the next 3 a little bit quicker so we can get to the connecting part. So the 3rd chord in CAGED is the G chord. People play this a lot of different ways too. Fingerings. Some people play this note here. Whatever you do, this is the shape I'm going to base all this stuff off of. All right, so the same thing. Take all these notes and we move them up by a half a step. So all those open notes there go straight across the 1st fret. All right, now this is one of the ones I was telling you about, which is kind of difficult because it's going to use all 4 fingers and a bar with that first finger to handle these three notes up here. So now I've got my 3rd finger on the 6th string, 2nd finger on the 5th, a bar across the 1st fret there, strings 2, 3, and 4, and then my pinky hitting this note way up here on the 4th fret. Now I'm not even sure if I can do this cleanly. It's using taking a lot of effort for me to reach that bar and get the pressure needed behind that finger to do that. But that's the idea. So if I take my G chord and I slide it up by half a step, I would get G sharp, or you could call it A flat. If I go up again, I get A sharp, or B flat, B, C, so on and so forth. Now for this chord, you can approach it a couple different ways, maybe more than a couple, but I tend to think of it in a couple different iterations. So I almost never play it like this. I never play the whole shape because, like I said, it's just too hard for my hand. You know, maybe way up high I could do it. It's a little bit easier because the tension's not so great up high. So I won't say you never do it, but it's rare in my case. So what I tend to do is I play the chord like this a lot of the time. So I just play the middle part of it. Now that's a little bit different than the others because the root note is right here and I am taking that note out completely. So you're really playing kind of an inverted, what they would call an inversion, where the root is not the lowest note in the chord. So for this B flat chord, or I'm sorry, B flat. Our B flat is not the lowest note, but that's okay. All the rest of the notes are there and it still sounds like B flat. Right? Generally speaking. Another way to do it would be to play this portion of the chord. So you still have the bar, but then you play with the pinky up on the top there. I'll do that sometimes. It's really nice if you're doing stuff like, you could do all these kind of cool chord shapes by just dropping this note down. But anyway, so that's the G shape. All right, then we have our E shape. So E has a bunch of open notes in it. And then it looks like that. There we go. All right, so we'll do the same thing. Bring everything up by a half a step. All right, so then again, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 notes. That's 4 fingers, and then we got these 2 extra notes. So I'm going to go ahead and bar across that first fret, straight across, and then use my other 3 fingers in the E shape in the middle there. All right, so we had an E chord. The root was E, and then we raised it up by a half a step, so we get F. This might be something that you're relatively familiar with. F is a popular chord and it comes up relatively early. And then this is the golden example of what a bar chord is, B-A-R-R-E, because you are using a finger to cover more than one string. That's the definition of a bar. It doesn't have to be all the way across, it can be partial like we saw earlier. So that's an F chord. F sharp, G, G sharp, A, so on and so forth. So now this one isn't as bad, I find, because even though you're doing a bar, and that will require some practice if it's something that you haven't done to build up the strength, but the orientation of your thumb, so like if I do the G chord shape, my thumb is way down in the back here, so it's like not behind the finger that really needs the force behind it. So it's harder for me to mash my index finger there because my thumb is like way back here. But with the F shape, or this E shape rather, when I'm doing a full bar, my thumb is right behind the same part of the neck that my index is pushing down. So I've got this maximum amount of pressure that I can put down there. So that tends to be a little bit easier, but I won't say easy because people who have never done bar chords will run into issues where they just don't have the muscles built up yet, right? You just physically can't push down hard enough to make it happen. So in that case, you can look at the F shape, or the E shape rather, in a few different ways while you're getting started. You can do just that and leave out the top strings altogether. So in that case, you're still using your index finger to do some work, but instead of mashing it down to grab the notes, to push the notes down and fret them, you're pushing most of your pressure on the 6th string, but you're draping the finger over the back of the 2 strings so that they don't sound. And that way you can, freely strum all 6 strings and not hear those two notes there. Or you can do this and take the root out and build the chord up like that. That one I see frequently. So back down to F here. So you're just playing the middle part of it. You're leaving out the top string. And if you want, you can bar with the 1st finger. Or you don't have to. You can just mute it. That's a good one because it doesn't require any barring. And then if you want, you can do it like this, which does require a bar, but it's a relatively easier bar than the full one. You're just doing 2 strings. Still can be tough if it's something you haven't done before, but it's a good skill to have. And there's F. Alright, but so all that's based on the E shape, so C-A-G-E. Alright, and then lastly, the last main shape is the D chord shape. So we have typically an open 4th string. And we have this kind of like triangular shape here for our D chord. Now if we move everything up, then we get this. Now this one is a bit of a stretch, but it doesn't require any barring, so the difficulty level is somewhere in the middle. A stretch is certainly challenging. Alright, so now if we had a D chord, D was our root, and we raise it by a half a step, raise everything by a half a step, then our new root is D sharp, or you could call it E flat. Move it up again, you get E, F, F sharp, G, so on and so forth. Alright, so that's the process. That right there, I think, can be really fantastic for people who feel like their chord, for 2 things. One, people who feel like they need to expand their chord vocabulary because they're running into instances in sheet music or tabs or whatever where you just don't know the chord. Like, I don't know how to play a B chord, so what do I do? Usually you look it up and you probably see one of the shapes that I'm showing you right here. So it's a good time to just take the time to work on that stuff, because then you won't run into any chords that you can't play, because you can multiply these, like I said, all over the place. So then the other thing is, for 2 of these shapes, commonly I'll say 2 of the shapes can easily be turned into minor chords. So now we had the E, and then we moved it up to an F, so we raised that E, open E shape up by a half a step, and we barred. Now if you want to turn this into a minor chord, you just take this note out right here. This is the G sharp, and you lower that down, or well, in this case it would be an A, and you're lowering it down to an A flat, which gives you an F minor. But it doesn't matter so much which chord I'm playing specifically, just that this is a minor shape, a bar chord shape. That now you take a major chord, F, take this finger off, and you get F minor, and then you can raise it up, and you get F sharp minor, G minor, G sharp minor, A minor, so on and so forth. Alright, that's really nice. The other one that you commonly see turned into a minor chord is the A shape. So if we take A and raise it up by a half a step and bar, we get B flat. Now if you take this note here and you drop it down by a half a step, which does require you to change your fingering, right? You have to reorganize your fingers there. Now you get B flat minor. You go up again, slide it up, you get B minor. So B minor is a really a common chord, a chord you see all the time. C minor, D minor, or C sharp minor, D minor, D sharp, E, F, right? So those are the two, I would say, if you can take those two shapes, the E shape and the A shape, learn them as closed position chords, which would be major, and then learn how to convert them to minor, then you really have it made. Because then you can play just about anything. In a closed position. So when people throw a tune at you that's in B flat and it's got all these chords that you're not familiar with, you can figure them out pretty quick using just those four shapes: the E major, the E minor shape, the A major, and the A minor shape. But you can certainly do it with D as well. It's a little bit tougher and a little bit less common. I don't see it used as often, but you can certainly do it. So say we have our D shape, and then we raise it up by a half a step, making it an E flat. And then we take the note that would have been here and we lower it down by a half a step, which does require us to change our fingering. Then you get minor. It's a nice chord. It's one you don't see very often because I don't know, it's a little spindly. Got 4 fingers on 4 different frets spread across a pretty big range. But it can come in handy. Now the C shape and the, let's see. Let's see why the C shape doesn't quite work for this. So if we're here, we take a C shape, we raise it up and make it C sharp. The note that has to go down is right here. It's this note right here. Well, this one and this one would have to go back down to being open. Then you'd have something like this. And then now we've introduced an open string, so if we wanted to slide it up, then we have to either mute that string or figure out how to hit it, and we're really out of fingers. It's not that it's impossible to play, this portion of it, but there's so many better ways to play these chords. I don't know why you would reach for this version of it. But you could. And then the G chord shape, the notes that would have to go down, so B would go down to B flat, something like that. Then you again end up with a weird situation where you can't quite do it. You just don't have enough fingers in some cases, and others you just can't reach as far as you would have to reach. Just the shapes aren't conducive to turning them into minor, but the other three you certainly can, and should spend time, especially on the E and the A shapes. Those will really help you fill in a lot of gaps with major and minor chords for a lot of the tunes that you might want to play. B minor, like I said, comes up a lot. F comes up a lot, and those are probably the big two. B flat sometimes depends on who you're playing, whose music you're trying to play. All right, so that's the first part. So I want you to take some time to work on that, which is just taking these open shapes and making them closed shapes. And pay special attention to the cases where I showed alternate fingerings, so don't feel like you have to master this crazy big G shape. If you can, more power to you, but don't like stress over getting this down, because you can play it in simpler ways that are just as effective. All right, so then but take the time to get that down. And now the second part of this is the organizational part, the thing that I think helps you feel a little bit more comfortable playing up and down the neck, because you can see similar shapes pop up where it doesn't feel like you're so far away from something that's familiar to you. And this is why we spell it CAGED, C-A-G-E-D, is because these chords actually fit together and kind of overlap one another in that order. So let's go back to our C chord. except we'll slide it up and we'll make it our closed position shape, right, with our bar there. So we got C sharp. And I don't want you to worry too much about the fact that it's C sharp. We're really just focusing on the shapes of the chords here. Doesn't so much matter which specific chord we're playing. All right, so the root of this chord is right here. This is a C note in a C chord, right? C chord, that's the root. If we slide it up, we get C sharp. That's still the root. If we slide it up again, it's still the root. It's a D now, but that's the root note. So now if we use this root note and play the next shape in the order, so we're doing CAGED, C-A-G-E-D, so we have a C shape now. Now if we play an A shape using the same root, then we get rid of all those notes and we get something like this. So using the same root, so here I am on a C sharp chord because that note is C sharp. And if I instead put my index there and build an A-shaped chord off of that, then I get the same chord using a different shape. So here's C sharp using the C shape, and here's the C sharp using the A shape. So you can hear that the voicing is different. The order of the notes might be a little bit different. But the chord is the same. The notes are the same that go in both of these chords. But it's two different ways to play the same thing. And now we've moved our positioning. So now we're no longer down at the base of the neck here. We've moved up. So this should feel, the goal of this is to make this shape feel less like you're in no man's land. If you're used to playing C, A, G, and whatever and hang down here, and then you suddenly play a chord way up here, it might feel uncomfortable because you're like, I don't know where I am. But if you can see that this root note is the same as the root note for the previous chord, then it's a little bit less scary. Alright, so let me recreate this a little bit lower on my diagram here. So this is what we're playing here. Now if we move this root note, if we take the upper portion of this and we add these notes, moving ourselves up the neck, so we were here, figure out which way to turn here. If we take this part of the chord and bar it, and then add our other three fingers, now we're playing the same chord, C sharp again, but with a G shape. So we were here, and then we use the same upper part, these three notes here, become part of the G shape, so C-A-G. Alright, and then we had our root on the 6th string, so now from there, we can then play the E shape. So we take our root note there, and bar, and play the E shape. And now we have that C sharp chord again using the E shape. Alright, and so now this chord has a root here, and it also has a root here. So if we build a D shape up from that root, getting rid of these other ones here. So we're here on the guitar. So if I take this root note and build my D shape from there, then I have another C sharp chord. And now you see this triangular shape. This would form the basis of our C shape again, if we were to continue to go up. Like that. Alright, so then I can take my C sharp chord. So using a C shape, an A shape, a G shape, an E shape, a D shape, and then a C shape again, and I can play the same chord in 5 different places. And I can see that they're connected in a specific way, in that specific order. So this is, I think, just useful because then you can come up here and say you've got, you want to play a G chord. Well, you can usually play it like this, and that's fine. But you can also play it here. You can play it here, or here, And this can come in handy, especially if you're playing with another guitar player or maybe a piano player or something like that, or maybe you're recording your own tunes and you've already got like the rhythm guitar part and you want to add more to the tune. It's really useful to take something like this, for example, take G. So maybe your song is like just kind of strumming on this G chord, and that's like the lead guitar part, or the like rhythm guitar part. Then you can come up here and take a G shape, and maybe you do some picking, or whatever. And now you're in a higher register. You're still playing a chord that it's the same chord, G and G, so it'll blend together really nice. But you're able to play it in a different part of the guitar. And that won't feel quite so scary to you because you can see that it's just that C shape with a G root, which makes it a G chord. All right. So that's how I think of the CAGED system. It's got those two advantages. It's taking these 5 major chord shapes that people learn early on in their guitar study, and it's showing you a way to massively extend their usefulness. If you can change your fingering up just a little bit and slide the chord out of an open position into a closed position, then you're multiplying the number of chords it can be, depending on where you play it. And that vastly expands your chord vocabulary. And then you can take 2 or 3 of the shapes and make them into minor chords, and then that's just 12 more chords you can play. And that will totally cover you for just standard major and minor chords. You won't have to worry about ever figuring out any more of those, pretty much, for most of the stuff you want to do. And then it also allows you to look at a part of the guitar that maybe you're less familiar playing in, and being less daunted by it, because you can see how it connects back down to something that you do know. So I did a video on finding octaves, which is kind of would go nicely with this study, because it's a similar type of idea where you're taking a part of the guitar that maybe you know, like, oh, I know that's F because it's right above E, and going, well, F is also here and here and here, and following a specific pattern, you can take an area of the guitar that is familiar and use it as kind of a home base to travel to a part of the guitar that maybe isn't, or vice versa. Maybe you're playing something up here and you're not really sure what it is. You can kind of leapfrog your way back down and go, oh, I see, it's just this, but it was in a position that I didn't recognize. And of course, the more you do that, the more comfortable this stuff gets. So that is the CAGED system. There have been books written about this stuff, so I would say that is just a cursory understanding of what it is. And I think that's plenty useful as it is, but you can certainly buy books and take courses on just the CAGED system, and people connect it to major scale shapes and do all kinds of really in-depth stuff. But there's your little light introduction. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you all in the next video. Thank you for watching.